Hello, everyone. My name is Spencer Walsh. We have a big show for you, potentially the last show of the Biden campaign, not presidency, but campaign, while he is still in the race. We'll tell you why that is. We'll tell you what just happened. A big donor call. Going to give you all the details on that with Kamala Harris on the call. We'll tell you what she said to the donors about her thoughts on Biden's state. We'll also give you some general news from around the Biden story today, with many more lawmakers weighing in on the decision, including AOC. Who had some questionable, some fair points to make in about an hour-long Instagram Live last night. Also, the International Criminal Court of Justice has ruled that Israel's continued presence in the occupied Palestinian territory is unlawful and should come to an end as rapidly as possible. We'll tell you why that is so significant. Also, the Houthis have struck Tel Aviv. We'll tell you why that is a significant attack. And Sean O'Brien, the Teamsters president, who rode in on a wave of reform, is getting challenged now from one of his top allies for not doing enough in that top ally's opinion. So he's essentially going to get the Teamsters version of a primary. Got a great show for you guys. It's Newsflash. So it really has been a crazy couple of days. We, started off with, again, the Adam Schiff. We talked about how Adam Schiff on the last show is so significant because he is so close to Pelosi. We've heard, although I love this, Hillary and Bill are apparently the last Democratic stalwarts who really do think that Biden should be staying in. Pretty much everyone has been silent on that, to pretty much non-committal. When they're forced to be asked about it in public. We then heard, privately that Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer have both told Biden the views of their caucus more broadly are that he should drop out. We have heard from multiple sources, many different ways to Sunday, that he is seriously considering and warming up to the arguments that he may be in some serious trouble. We've seen continuing more videos of, flubs, of physical frailty. There was a kind of a British news report that I was watching, I think was on, ITV or something. The guy walking down the stairs out of the plane needs help to get into the car. It is just not a good situation in any way. And this brings us to kind of a just general update from today. And we just have a brand new, in the past 12 minutes, we've had two Democrats calling for Biden to drop out from the race. From the time where I was planning the show, putting the story together until now, Gabe Vasquez of New Mexico has called on the president to step aside to give Democrats the best opportunity to win in November. Vasquez is facing a tight challenge on his congressional seat, and we'll get to this. New Mexico has been a state that, even in the Hillary Clinton years, definitely throughout the Obama years, was a solidly blue state. So it is really remarkable to see. And we saw kind of on the governor call that Michelle Lujan Grisham, who's the governor there, said that a Democratic governor said, you are in danger of losing this state. And today, Gabe Vasquez becomes the second elected official nationally to call on Biden to drop out from that state. Just give you a general look on what you need to know. President Biden vowed Friday to return to the campaign trail next week, maintaining its public defiance, even as people close to the president said they believe he has begun to waver privately about whether to stay in the race against former President Donald Trump. As Biden isolates because of his COVID at the beach house in Delaware, the crisis engulfing his presidency is playing out in two different environments. Among his closest advisors and family watching behind closed doors, and in front of the cameras with the world watching. And this has been a pretty big thing, this kind of public-private dichotomy that I think has been very, very damaging to the Democratic Party, and I'm sure we'll see that reflected in different ways, whether it be the refusal of Kamala to speak up, because apparently she's been pretty active behind closed doors, but also so many of the Democratic members, and I think AOC made a pretty good point here on this as well, so many of the Democratic members think he should should have dropped out privately and, haven't said it until now, and even now are saying it privately. So, and she thinks, I guess, that she should still stay in. He should still stay in, excuse me. But the thing is that he is, he is more facing 10 times more opposition privately than he is publicly. He was on the air today being like, he's in it to win it. This was the case. Jen O'Malley Dillon said he's in it to win it, released a statement saying that he is going to continue to expose the threat of Donald Trump's Project 2025 agenda. I'll make the case for my own record. And again, all these left-wing policies. It's just like, if I, as a leftist, talking about, looking at this stuff, hearing this stuff, it's offensive. It's offensive, and it's really deeply depressing that someone like AOC would take that seriously. But privately, some of the people close to the president and his team say they've begun listening more seriously to the accelerating barrage of calls for him to drop out and the mounting evidence that he's falling far behind Trump, who concluded the Republican convention Thursday night with a Mandarin-combative acceptance speech and his party united behind him. Many of Biden's associates are holding back from making harsh public statements because they feel empathy for what he's going through, including what some say is humiliation of being forced out of a re-election campaign that he believes he can win. Again, I think this is a time where Democrats just have to put their personal relationships aside and think about the fact that, hey, we are making a request. We are trying to make a contract, a deal with the American people that says we are putting this person up because we believe he has the best agenda to not only defeat Donald Trump, but to govern America for 4 more years. And that is what they're saying. That's what they're asking people to vote for Joe Biden on the basis of. And what they're clearly saying is that they are, at least privately, that they don't think he can win. They don't think he can, serve this. And even if, so these are the ones that are holding back on their public statements. Going public, some said, might cause the president to dig in even more. But I think it's a fair point. But I think it's just honest, it's responsible, and it's honestly very smart politics. Because if you think that a guy who is, let's be honest, clearly not up to serving 4 more years through 2029 in the White House, I think saying it out loud, saying it to the people, which, pretty much every poll shows, voters by and large deeply, deeply believe that he is not fit to continue serving in the Oval Office especially for another 4 years. Why should anybody ask or why should you be able to ask anyone for their trust again? It's just a very dishonest thing to push when you don't even believe it yourself. And I think, I highlighted this at the time. I think Jared Golden was absolutely right about it. It is going to cause more discontent and problems within the Democratic Party. So discussions about Biden's advisors have advanced, among Biden's advisors have advanced to the point they're talking about the best timing and other details for announcement if the president decides to give up his bid for a second term, according to one person informed about the situation. Some people in Biden's camp have privately told Democrat allies that his resolve has been shaken by 3 developments. Decision by Representative Nancy Pelosi, the former House Speaker, to weigh in strongly on his candidacy, and she did that through Adam Schiff in a private conversation where it was a really remarkable private conversation that was reported where she essentially said, oh, you can't win. Biden says, yes, I can. I've seen the polls. And then she goes, get me Mike Donnellan, which is, for those of you who don't know, one of his closest advisors all the way through his senatorial days in Delaware, and somebody who she clearly thinks is feeding him bad polls because she goes, get Donnellan on the phone. We'll talk about these polls. Let's see it. The former House Speaker, weighing in strongly on his candidacy, the state polls showing this path to electoral college victory is going far more remote, and a spending boycott by key party donors. The money continues to dry up. Meanwhile, more House members for President Biden called for President Biden to end his campaign. Representative Greg Landsman, who had flipped his Ohio district to Democrats in 2022, urged the president to step down. Representative Jared Huffman of California, Mark Vesey of Texas, I believe is a congressional Black Caucus member, Mark Pokin of Wisconsin, and Jesus Troy Garcia of Chicago or Illinois area, issued a joint letter to Biden. We're getting a joint letter territory here, asking him to pass the torch to a new generation, after Representative Sean Casten of Illinois delivered a similar message in an essay to the Chicago Tribune. And Martin Heinrich of New Mexico is running for re-election in a state that has trended toward Republicans since Biden's poor debate performance, became the third Democratic senator to call for Biden to drop out. The second there was John Tester of the very red state of North Dakota, and first was Peter Welch of Vermont. So the White House physician said in a letter that Biden's COVID symptoms have improved meaningfully after 4 doses of the antiviral drug Paxlovid, and that his pulse, blood pressure, and other measurements were absolutely normal. Oh, by the way, all this reporting here that I'm reading is from the New York Times. So after the debate, with the White House seeking to whip up Democratic support for remaining the race, aides to Ms. Harris reached out to Jeff Zients, the White House chief of staff, to insist it avoid doing so at the expense of degrading her abilities. The situation has become more awkward as the pressure goes on Biden to bow out, which would leave Harris as the most likely Democratic nominee. So speaking of Harris was on a conference call with donors that Axios has just reported on. So the call is the latest example of Biden's campaign leadership working to turn around the low morale among staffers in the aftermath of Biden's debate. So again, the Kamala donor call comes as she is really increasingly fighting, a lot of this pressure, trying to stay loyal to Biden, which again could hurt her if she eventually does end up leaving the ticket. But this is a interesting call here of O'Malley Dillon with all the campaign staff. Biden is O'Malley Dillon is the campaign chair, saying essentially, don't watch cable news. Biden's in the race. I talked to him this morning. He sounds like shit because he's not feeling that well, she said, noting his recent COVID diagnosis. But he is doing the work, and he is focused on what you guys are doing. O'Malley Dillon added that the people that the president is hearing from are saying, stay in the race and keep going and keep fighting, and we need you. I wonder which person is telling President Biden we need them. I'd like to meet them. And so those voices are not getting drowned out by cable news. O'Malley Dillon is kind of saying, blaming the media for their problems here is a time-honored tradition of, losers, mostly in the Democratic Party. But she's taking incoming from Democratic lawmakers and donors, and some of her own staff, who feel upset the White House was not more candid about Biden's fitness in the months before the debate. Meanwhile, 65%, as we talked about with the AP NORC poll, of Democrats want Biden to withdraw from the race. Marty Walsh, who's a former labor secretary, tried to pep people up in his Boston accent, and essentially citing some kind of donor statistics or some canvassing statistics, that there was nothing to worry about, and everything was going great. So, massive, positive returns on the canvassing front. So, again, we'll see about that. So, on this other call that happened, trying to buck up Democratic Party's biggest donors, that was handled by Kamala Harris. And this is in the New York Times, Teddy Schleifer and Lisa Lehrer. So, the really extraordinary turmoil now among the Democrats, when Harris spoke to the big donor group that was kind of getting cold feet on the Biden presidency and the Biden candidacy especially, but several listeners say they found the meeting overall to be little of value, even at times condescending, believing that the message ignored donors' legitimate concerns about a Biden-led ticket. Harris, of course, is in a delicate position. She must demonstrate loyalty to her boss, but also be prepared to jump immediately to the top of the Democratic ticket if Biden were to withdraw. I will start by sharing something with all of you, Harris said, according to a listener who described the remarks on a condition of anonymity. And she goes, something I believe in my heart of hearts. It's something I feel strongly you should all hear and you should all take with you when you leave. And tell your friends, too. It's like, am I going to drop out? Or is Biden going to drop out? Am I going to be the new president? Like, what is she going to say? And then she just goes, we are going to win this election. It's like, okay, great. 7 other people described the contents of the call, and that's 7 other people, which was organized primarily by Impactual, an influential Democratic advisory firm for major donors. It was endorsed in part by Reid Hoffman, one of the Democratic Party's biggest givers and a founder of LinkedIn, who on Friday morning encouraged his Silicon Valley network to join the meeting. A campaign official who insisted on anonymity because of the sensitivity of the matter said Harris had joined the call at the request of the White House. So interesting. Harris spoke by video for just over 5 minutes, reiterating some of the well-worn attack lines on Trump, saying, there's a bunch of crazy stuff Trump did at the presidential election. Not surprisingly, there was no news generated on this call, and instead it was a pitch for donors to continue to invest in groups on the ground who are working to defeat Donald Trump. Read an email from Corridor Partners, which advises donors focused on climate issues. The VP spoke briefly and encouraged us all to keep working hard to win in November. Some of the leaders, though, of progressive advocacy groups expressed concern that the conversation about Biden's availability was a self-inflicted wound and hurting them on front lines, listeners said. The group's leaders argued there was a mismatch between elites' opinions of the presidential race after the first debate and voters' opinions on the matter, like the economy, an argument that some attendees said they found viable. Still, after Harris stopped speaking, according to 3 listeners, one participant who was unmuted could be overheard calling the entire call ludicrous. So I don't think this is going to get many of the big money donors back on side. But, Somos Votantes, Latino activist group, I think that is absolutely delusional from them, talking about, this is going to hurt, some of our, only the poor, working class Latino voters that we are supposed to be representing. They would love to vote for Joe Biden. They love his senility. They love when he just mixes up his words and garbles them and calls, different people, still other different people, calling Zelensky President Putin. They love that stuff. They can't get enough of it. It's only you elite donors who care about having a president that's actually fit for office on a mental level. It's just, again, on the top of the poll, 65% of Democratic Party voters think that Biden should step aside. So it's absolutely delusional. Absolutely delusional. Meanwhile, we also have AOC coming out on this. This is a bit of what she had to say on an hour-long Instagram Live last night. Let's take a listen.
I also think that there's certain things about Joe Biden that, again, I'm not here to dismiss people's concerns, but I also think there are certain things about Joe Biden as a candidate and as a person that people often conflate with other issues. For example, he had the debate that he had. That debate had no people. There was no audience. It was like cameras and 2 pundits and the president and former President Trump. And then people went the next day and they saw that he did amazing the day. He did a rally, I believe, in North Carolina. Wow. And he did a rally the day after, and it went super, super well. And people were like, where was this Joe Biden? You have to understand, these people are human beings, and from what I assess, Joe Biden needs the energy of people around him.
Are you serious? News. This is where it talks about the ridiculousness and the inherent lack of credibility in the Democrats who are arguing, like AOC is, for Biden to stay in, because it's hey, wait a minute. The best argument is he needs a cheering crowd around him to function well. That's essentially what she's saying. You're trying to push this guy up to be president for 4 more years. The next time he calls Benjamin Netanyahu, does he have to put it on speakerphone in front of a live studio audience or something? This is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. There's always going to be, he's like that it's not just, he has speaking issues when it's a call. Or when it's kind of a public-facing event. The same speaking issues, as we've seen from kind of private reports and congressional testimonials, have happened on these private calls that he's giving to frontline representatives, Hispanic caucus, whoever. They are happening in just the same. And is he supposed to have a bunch of his cheering supporters behind him there everywhere he goes? That is essentially the point that she's making here. It's absolutely unserious, and it's just how are people supposed to take this seriously? How are people supposed to trust anyone on the Democratic side making this argument when it's so transparently ludicrous?
And he just did a rally in Detroit, and when he's around thousands of people, that is how he resonates. And again, I'm not here to dismiss, and you can totally rake me over the coals trust me, if I was trying to do something that was like, that I think was like calculatingly the best for me, I would not be on this live right now. You know, like, it's just easy to just hang back. But the reason I'm doing it is because I care about the future of this country. I care about the outcome of this election profoundly and deeply, just like all of you.
And again, I definitely agree with the point that she's not, acting in, to advance her political career here, because oh boy, is she not. It would have been much smarter for her to hang back. But this is where, if she thinks she's doing this for, and I think she, in her heart of hearts, thinks that she's doing this for, genuine reasons, like, I think that could be, honestly, even more disturbing, because her analysis coming at the situation, or understanding of the situation, seems to be absolutely nonsense, like absolutely out to left field. Like, and her reasoning being, oh, I care about the future of this country, so does everybody calling for Biden to drop out. Not only do they care of the future of the country, they care about the future of the Democratic Party, which would lose a lot of freaking legitimacy if they try and push this guy who everyone knows that everyone in the Democratic Party knew for a very long time about the state of this man, and just kept going with it. Like this is... How do you think that's going to affect the country? How do you think that's going to help Trump? We're already seeing how it's helping Trump in every single way, like every single day. Like, it is a very big boon to Trump, who has essentially tailored his campaign to run to Biden. And it's going to hurt the Democratic Party for reasons I've also discussed, but it is completely delusional, in my opinion, to be like, yes, we're going to put up this 82-year-old man who maybe did some good things while he was president, but we just need to beat Trump, and I'm too scared to essentially do anything else. But I think we got to stay the way we are for the good of the country, because they care about Trump. But it's just delusional. It's circular, psychotic logic. Like, it is just not in any way a sensible thing to do if you believe all the things that you say you believe. Let's take a look at some of her other arguments. This is a summary from a woman named Ali Peck, who works for the Department of Energy. And it seems to be pretty good. So she says, the debate sucked, Biden sucked, Trump sucked, and is a racist and neo-Nazi, but she doesn't think it changed what normal people already knew. What changed is the middle group between regular voters and people in power, the pundits, the media, etc. I think that's a fair point. If this was 6 months ago, 8 months ago, a year ago, this would be a different conversation. But a lot of people in the middle group weren't willing to have the conversation then. So again, like, it goes to her. She's in this pundit media, elected official, low-level elected official group. Why weren't you, if you believe this, why weren't you pushing to have that conversation then? Why weren't you, standing up, putting your neck out if you think this is such a serious issue? Like, it does not make her look very good. There is a time for private and off-the-record comments, but if you're going to say as an elected official that you're resigned to Trump winning, leave your seat. So, again, I think she is effectively saying she resigned herself to Trump winning if she thinks that Biden is the best person to defeat Trump, and she feels comfortable putting up Biden against Trump, or feels that that's the only thing that we can do. Because everyone who's saying, oh, we're resigned to Trump winning, was also resigned to Biden being the nominee. So it's absolute insanity. It's kind of her job as somebody who's executing decisions, as she says in this live. It's her job to try and, if she thinks this is so bad, start that conversation. And it's definitely not the 65% of voters' fault who think that Biden should leave. It's definitely not their fault that this conversation didn't happen. There are several reasons that she's come to the conclusion she has. First, the legal challenges in Ohio and other swing states with respect to getting a new name on the ballot are very serious. Ohio is not a swing state. We know that. And you could easily win without getting a single vote in Ohio due to the electoral college system. You probably would lose the popular vote, but as we know, that doesn't matter. Kamala could if the ballot was changed. So, and again, the legal justification, even if you take that or kind of cast that original argument aside, the legal justification is pretty thin because, again, they've already passed a law, and the Democrats have said very, very clearly, the Democrats, the Republicans, even in Ohio, have said very, very clearly that we're going to get this on the ballot. There is no real legal challenges. AOC here is either very misinformed or is straight up lying, because that is not, they plan to fix this law. They have fixed this law, and they've taken it effect. So, it'll be whatever the nominee of the Democratic Party is. That's what's going to end up being on the ballot. They have said that this is not, every single Ohio Republican have said that Democrats don't have, anything to worry about with regards to this. They called a special session of the legislature to pass it for a reason. And even in Michigan, she's talking about, 2 days after the convention where, the ballot deadline comes. Like seriously, 2 days after the convention? Well, good thing you're planning on nominating Biden a whole 3 weeks before the convention, 4 weeks before the convention. It's so ludicrous and so kind of farcical, on his face. I guess I would say the bottom line on this is, if you're looking at this from a, predictive, what is Biden going to do? What's going to happen? I think there is reasonable things to look at and expect on both sides of this. The reporting about him, potentially dropping out over this weekend, I think is very credible, very possible, but Biden seems to be pretty much soldiering on at this point. I personally, if I had to bet, I don't think he'll drop out this weekend, but I think the pressure on the Democratic side will continue. But the bottom line is, I think it is really deeply irresponsible for Democrats to put up somebody. It's really damaging to the country, damaging the party, for the stability and the policy that the country will face. If they put up Biden and Trump, clearly wins, or even if Biden wins, it's damaging the country to have someone like that in charge for 4 years, and put someone who's knowingly that feeble up for 4 years. It's also damaging the credibility of the Democratic Party. And it is, something that is incredibly, incredibly irresponsible. And also, it's something that is purely the Democratic Party's fault, because they knew the situation. They could have fixed it long ago, but they refused. And again, it's definitely not the voters' fault. It's definitely not, these people who should be characterized as, we want Biden in. We need Biden in. That is a joke. That is not what's happening here. This is just, ridiculous. It's ridiculous stuff. So whatever happens, this has been the Democratic Party's bed that they have made time and time again throughout the past 4 years. And now they're trying to get out of laying in it, which I think would be better for the country, better for the party. But even if they do get out of it, the party's going to have a lot of explaining to do about why he got to where he got so easily for so long. And at the end of the day, who suffers? The voters suffer. Democratic voters suffer, who wanted a better choice and has said so time and time again, overwhelmingly. If you look at the polls about how, they don't think he's fit, how there was an appetite for, better options. Majorities of Democratic voters wanted better options, or at least another option to consider in this primary, but Biden refused. So, again, they suffer, and all of America's voters obviously suffer with, I think, more with Trump than with a feeble Biden. But with a feeble Biden, they will suffer, and they will not have a real democracy, where the president is who they elected and who campaigned for their election is ably carrying out tasks in the people's interests every day. So, it's definitely something for the Democratic Party to consider. Don't know, honestly, what will happen over the weekend. It's going to be very interesting to see and come back on Monday and talk about it. But, again, this is the Democratic Party's bed. Whether they lay in it or not, they're still in a lot of trouble, but it's the voters who suffer. The ICJ has called the Israeli occupation unlawful in a new ruling today. Nawaf Salam, president of the ICJ in The Hague, read out the non-binding advisory opinion issued by the 15-judge panel on Israel's occupation of Palestinian territory on Friday. The judge pointed to a wide list of policies, including the building and expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, use of the area's natural resources, and the annexation and imposition of permanent control over land and discriminatory policies, against the Palestinians, all of which it said violated international law. The court said Israel has no right to sovereignty over the territories, is violating international laws against acquiring territory by force, and is impeding Palestinians' right to self-determination. It said other nations were obliged not to render aid or assistance in maintaining Israel's presence in the territory. It said Israel, which again, at the U.S. right there, big at for the U.S., it said Israel must end settlement construction immediately, and existing settlements must be recovered, according to a summary of the more than 80-page opinion read out by Salam. Israel's abuse of its status as the occupying power renders its presence in the occupied Palestinian territory unlawful. Israel's settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and the regime associated with them have been established and are being maintained in violation of international law. The court's opinion was sought in a 2022 request from the UN General Assembly. It's the highest UN body for hearing disputes between states, the ICJ. And again, it kind of shows that, while we have these institutions, and these institutions are filled with good people that make the right decisions in times of crises and uphold their legitimacy, and it wasn't something that was always going to be guaranteed. And I think it is significant to see them kind of, coming out and attacking the American interests, because American interests we've seen take such a big role in the world, since World War II. It also shows, again, that American influence doesn't necessarily have to bow down to these institutions that they've created, and they can just ignore them with, at the moment, very, very little consequences. And I think it's going to be very, very telling to see, once these arrest warrants come out, what exactly that is going to be. We haven't heard too much about, they applied for arrest warrants, but, nothing has kind of come back on that, which I think is going to be definitely something to keep a very close eye on. But more broadly, I would say that this is, it's obviously a win. It's obviously something that we have known for a long time, and it is credit to the ICJ for them doing what they're doing. But I do think that it is going to, it really does show the kind of almost futility. Although it is good to have them, and it's good to kind of point to these issues. We kind of run to this any time that the ICJ makes a good ruling, as they've consistently done throughout this genocide that we've seen unfold. It does expose how that these institutions that the U.S. kind of originally did create, the kind of Senator Lindsey Graham saying that these were for Africans and Russians. I think it also does kind of show how far the U.S. has fallen from its, 1945 defender of freedom and democracy against, Nazism and fascism and communism and that kind of stuff. It does show how far they have fallen from that kind of global policeman where they had so much legitimacy in performing that task to a clear aiders and abettors of war crime committing country like Israel, and how really they have been pushed. They have been kind of told in a certain sense, but they push on in violation anyway, continuing to chip away little by little in their status. It's starting to affect them in some ways. We'll see how it affects them in the future, as more rulings like this are sure, hopefully, to keep coming. This is pretty significant. The Houthis have just drone striked Tel Aviv. This was last night, struck, Tel Aviv, killing one person and injuring 8. Israeli media has identified the dead man as Yevgeny Ferder, who moved from Israel to Belarus to Israel from Belarus, at the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war. Last night's strike is unique. It's the first time the group is known to have hit Tel Aviv, though the Houthis have waged a continued campaign against targets they claim are linked to Israel since the ongoing devastating war on Gaza broke out in October. So it struck pretty central to Tel Aviv in the early hours of Friday morning. The site itself, though, is thought to be close to a number of hotels, many of them hosting those displaced from Israel's northern border with Lebanon. The U.S. Embassy office is also close to the site of the attack. The initial inquiry indicates that the explosion in Tel Aviv is caused by the falling of an aerial target, and no sirens were activated. The incident is under thorough review, attributing its inability to detect the drone to human error rather than a system failure. So it's going to be interesting to see, obviously taken with a grain of salt on that. But the Israeli army spokesman, Daniel Hagari, said in a video released on Friday evening that the drone was a Samad 3, and the aircraft hit an apartment building, which is obviously Iranian. Iran has not yet commented on the attack. According to Houthi spokesman Yahya Sari, The aircraft was a new type of drone named the Jaffa, which is capable of flying undetected through Israel's extensive air defense systems. So a pretty unusual situation that has never really happened before. They've launched in the drones at Israel, but they've all been intercepted. So it is a very serious thing. But although they have made some pretty extensive use of drone warfare, it's obviously mostly been on ships. I believe that last night's attack is part of the Houthi continuous escalation, said Messiah Shuja al-Din of Yemen-based Sana Center for Strategic Studies, suggesting that the repeated incidents of Houthi drones reaching distant targets was going to become more common. What's interesting is the target in the long range. It's kind of unlikely in the short term that this kind of triggers any of an escalation. Although Yoav Gallant has made moves towards potentially striking Yemen after the wake of that. Israel will, in all likelihood, feel compelled to do something since a person was killed. You can see Israel doing something like that now. Although there has been some Israeli strikes in Yemen in the past, so it may be a relatively small strike you can expect back in retaliation. But this definitely does, according to a lot of commentators, have been saying that this does signal a big boost in the range, and also the fact that it was really able to hit successfully is something that really did surprise a lot of people and represents a new step up for this axis of resistance. It definitely could have been a lot more significant had it hit a target and maybe a broader target, cause more of an explosion. But the fact that it went through, right at the heart of Israeli kind of government and civil society in Tel Aviv, is a incredibly significant development there that is going to, really shake up a lot of Israeli people. Are the Houthis really an Iranian proxy force? Well, it doesn't mean, although they are allied with Iran, doesn't mean Iran ordered last night's strike. This is by the way, all the reporting on Israel so far has come from Al Jazeera. I don't know if I said that in the past. However, how precise Tehran's control is over a rebel group has proven itself consistently unpredictable and at best uncertain. Iran, for a long time, has had this strategy of enabling non-state allies to build their own missiles. There are strong indications also with the Houthis that they quite likely have domestic production capability because they do control pretty much most of a whole country, so they are able to do things like that. But putting this into perspective, the long war in Gaza, as the Houthis continue to grow, this is Tim Kaine weighing in on this, and I think it really does show exactly what we are dealing with. This is from, I don't know if this was exactly from the in direct response to the Tel Aviv attack, but I do think that this is a pretty prescient point by somebody who, Tim Kaine, is a pretty moderate, pretty national security associated Democrat, and this is what he had to say on CNN about Biden striking the Houthis.
This loss of the SEAL lives was tragic, and it's now a number of days ago. And there might have been a thought at that time, well, maybe this is a one-off and it will stop. It's clearly not going to stop. You see the U.S. taking action with allies against the Houthis, and then the Houthis responding in kind. And the administration is saying that they don't expect the Houthis to stop. The only thing that has stopped the Houthis recently has been a hostage release deal. So when we got the hostage release deal, a month or so ago, where hostages were released by Hamas, Palestinian prisoners were released by Israel, and then there was a pause in hostilities to get humanitarian aid to Gazans, the Houthis stopped. That's the only thing that's shown there to be de-escalation.
So yeah, Tim Kaine says what I've been saying on Newsflash and what people have been, poo-pooing at in respectable places like the New York Times this entire calendar year, is that the Houthis care about Gaza. They are standing up to the depravities of Israel, kind of threatening and killing who they see to be their brethren and their allies in the region. And, who would not want to stand up against Israel and what Israel is doing in some way, shape, or form? And if you have, drones, you can stand up in a pretty significant way. And it has caused a lot of damage, according to most reports, in the Israeli economy. And I think the U.S. efforts to try and stop them have been remarkably unsuccessful. In fact, some say that the Houthis have even gotten stronger. And I think this strike inside Tel Aviv, although it was relatively small, is a great indication of that. So, not only will they have, the kind of U.S.-Israel force have a lot of, internal moral outrage at their actions, really for the first time, they are beginning to see and kind of continuing to see grow exterior force, kind of exterior armed force to challenge them and stop, or I guess check them, I guess would be the better word, from committing their depravities on a daily, hourly basis in Gaza and all throughout Palestine, of course, with U.S. support. And U.S. has also kind of been pretty embarrassed when it comes to their failure to stop this as well, because there's Operation Prosperity Guardian and all that stuff. Not really guarding a lot of prosperity, if I say so myself. So again, it is, I think, something that for anyone who wants to see a more just world should encourage these kind of events as we continue to see, another kind of countervailing force to check the violent domination, especially of that region of Israel, which is, of course, backed by the United States. Sean O'Brien, he is the president of the Teamsters, a labor union that's been pretty successful as of late. And he has been in hot water. I mean, he kind of led a pretty successful UPS strike where they won a relatively increased contract, although it wasn't kind of a blow out of the waters crazy thing like we saw with Sean Fain and the big three auto companies. And he went on the RNC to speak out this week. And this is, again, somebody who kind of sells himself as a more aggressive anti-business unionism union leader, someone who's supposed to be a real, democratic reform type guy, and going on the RNC, pledging support to people, saying like Josh Hawley's got it right on the money when he's talking about, working class Americans being propagandized to with, pride flags and stuff, and all this kind of essentially using, fascism and kind of this fake appeal to working people to justify the need to crack down on, trans liberation, or just gay liberation in general. It is a pretty sinister thing, and especially to see someone like Sean O'Brien say it's right on the money, not something at all that you want to see. I think, going to make your speech, make your case to the RNC is different, especially when you have like 70% of Teamster members supporting Trump. But, endorsements like that, not what you want to see at all. Rank and file members have attacked O'Brien's appearance as undemocratic, harmful to the union members of color and LGBTQ Teamsters, and politically unproductive. Longtime Teamster organizer John Palmer sat down with the Real News' Maximilian Alvarez to discuss his speech and why the union deserves better. So we'll get a little bit into this. Here's what he had to say in this interview. I have the transcripts in front of me. To the actual appearance, I think we live in a society where perception is reality, and there is more than one instance here. I refuse to meet with Donald Trump at the round table. There's no reason for me to sit down with Trump. I know what he is. Everyone knows what he is. His actions speak louder than his words, or his words as well. We know that he's crossed picket lines. We know that he's weakened the labor board. We know that during his term, they did literally nothing for labor, and they actually hurt the cause of labor, which is a very fair thing to say. And we know that the party that calls itself the Republican Party has now completely hitched his wagon to him. He's the leader. His family runs the convention. So by standing in front of those folks and delivering a speech like he did, which was a two-part speech, one part was basically trying, really, really praising Trump and his courage, if you want to call it that, to invite him to the convention, which was, in my estimation, not needed or necessary, and actually made us look like we're pandering to the Republican Party. The second part was the talking points. I mean, we all say these things. We all know union issues that need to be addressed. And I think the interesting part about the whole conversation or speech was when that came out, it got awfully quiet. When you start talking about corporations, he was talking to corporations. That's who these people are in the room. These people have no desire to hear that commentary. The very people they want to export from this country, they profit from that. They profit from cheap labor. They profit from workers not having rights. They profit from unsafe working conditions at the cost of workers, at the cost of people's environment. Again, back to the East Palestine issue. It was the train spillage from a few years ago. I'm going to say it in polite terms. The railroad craps in your backyard, they set it on fire, and then they leave. Unfortunately, I'm not as polished as many would like me to be, but I think I'm tired. That's what's wrong with politics right now. It's polished crap. It's a really good way of putting it. It's just people aren't delving into the issues. I believe he's knocked a lot of folks that were wondering whether they should support a Republican. I'm talking about union folks probably got pushed into doing this, and it was very clever on their part. Elections are won on the margins, and they know that they're digging into the Democratic base here. So I think it was a large mistake, and I think it was a tool for the Republican Party. So kind of interesting comments for a guy named John Palmer, who is planning on challenging, it's official, he is planning on challenging the current president, obviously Sean O'Brien, in the next union election in 2026. And I think he does make several good points. I think drawing the line between the, okay, you're trying to make your, bring your union message, but you also don't have to pander to the Republican Party. And also, I think the response of I think it's fair, to say that the whole composition of the Republican electorate was not represented in that room. So there are people who maybe were impacted by the labor rhetoric of Sean O'Brien's speech. But again, I think the stuff about pandering to Trump was kind of completely embarrassing and completely unnecessary, in my opinion. So I think that was very, very clear. But let's read his official statement saying that, he's forming an opposition slate and running for president in the 2026 Teamsters leadership election. Having experienced 2.5 years of General President Sean O'Brien's tumultuous presidency, I am announcing a candidacy for Teamsters national office in the 2026 election for officers. I invite Teamsters to join me in forming an opposition slate to send Sean O'Brien back to the truck. Let's put an end to false promises, business-friendly unionism, and concessionary backroom deals, essentially alleging that his kind of coalition, his group, Teamsters for a Democratic Union, essentially made an alliance with the old guard and have bought off opposition by handing out a few cushy jobs to some TDU members at the Marble Palace. The coalition has successfully been silenced all criticism of these reformers. O'Brien's attacks on dissenters are well known. He has threatened and continues to threaten members of his own general executive board, I'm going to assume. This is what that means. In addition, he publicly embarrassed the Teamsters in challenging a U.S. senator to a fight. His childish behavior is beneath the dignity of the office. I don't think that was necessarily a bad thing. He negotiated reduced hourly contributions of West Coast UPS Teamsters pensions, while members in the fund he manages received increases, all from the same employer and contract. He also allowed AI, AGI, and automation to run wild through many of our workplaces. His grand speeches and fist-pounding do nothing to aid 10,000 laid-off Teamsters at UPS. He walked out and abandoned Yellow Freight Teamsters. He attempted to kick the graphic communications Teamsters out of our union. He failed to support and engage our rail Teamsters during their latest contract, and he attacked the machinist union and encouraged Teamster locals to raid machinist shops. This has all culminated in the presence of an anti-union, anti-worker his presence at the anti-union, anti-worker RNC, kissing the ring of a man that scabbed a picket line, failing to pay workers, discriminating against people of color as a landlord, falsely accusing 5 black men in New York of murder, orchestrating an insurrection against the United States, dodging the draft, and appointing union busters from the Jones Day law firm to create one of the most anti-union labor boards in history. It's naive to believe that these folks at the RNC are going to help us in any way, shape, or form or manner. We have successfully estranged ourselves from the rest of the labor movement through the actions of one man. Should we really go out and seek more enemies right now? It has been said, you judge a tree by the fruit it bears, so we should not take one more bite out of this sour apple. So really putting it strong to him there. Let's put an end to this failed, phony policy of bluster and PR. We are better than this. Our members deserve better than this. Please help us in building a truly unified and reformative union where all the members' interests are served. In solidarity, John Palmer, VP at large. So this is he puts a little asterisk next to at large, saying for identification purposes only. So again, really telling stuff there. And I think Palmer here has a very good point, and some of this stuff I didn't even really know about. So it's going to be very interesting to see this kind of play out. And if you can activate a larger base who is dissatisfied within the union in O'Brien's handling. That's all we got for you guys today. Going long again. Apologies. We'll try and get it back. When the news calms down, it'll be Monday for our next show. We'll see you then.